Ever cut someone off and never looked back? Right, I did, if so.
I am going to start with the moment that made my stomach drop and my back straighten at the same time. Because there is no point easing into it when the entire story hangs on a single split screen in my head where on one side my parents are texting me that they feel completely wiped out and need to rest and cannot make the drive to see me walk across a stage I worked years to reach, while on the other side my phone lights up with a cheerful little notification that my sister Jenna has checked in at a spa with a caption about self-care and a photo where she tagged mom and dad and a discount code they apparently used, and I swear I could hear something click inside me, not a snap or a bang. Just that quiet click you hear when a door that has been stuck for years finally moves. If you have ever been the one who gets told to be the bigger person while your sibling is handed soft landings like party favors, you already know that this was not about a missed ceremony. Because if it were only about one day I could have swallowed the insult and gone on, but for as long as I can remember the pattern has been steady and boring in that way that small unfairness becomes a routine. With Jenna framed as the delicate one who needed extra care and special attention because stress gave her headaches and new beginnings made her fragile, while I was the one who could handle it, who could drive myself, who could make do with a phone call on the way home from work. And when I tried to raise it, I was told I was making things bigger than they were, and that not everything had to be a fight, which was funny because I have always been the one who hates fights. I just hate pretending even more. So when my parents sent that text using the exact kind of tone they would use when canceling a dinner with friends they did not want to see, polite and vague, and leaving no room for negotiation because they had already decided how the day would go, I answered with the bland acceptance they trained me to use, told them to rest and not to worry, then set my phone face down and let the silence wrap around me until the second notification came in, and there it was, the proof I did not even need. A public check-in, a row of little hearts from my aunt and my mother's church friends, a comment from my father about how proud he was of Jenna for taking care of herself, because health comes first, and I felt myself laugh. Not because it was funny, but because the script was so predictable that I could have written it word for word, and in that laugh there was something sharper than anger, a kind of focus I had not felt in a long time. I did not call them, and I did not message Jenna either, because I knew how that would go. The explanations about timing and miscommunication, and how they thought the graduation was next week, and how they always meant well, and how I should not ruin a nice day by being negative. And I decided I was done playing the part of the reasonable daughter who absorbs the hit and makes everyone comfortable again, so I opened my notes and wrote down the names of the people who never made me earn their attention with a performance, my advisor who answered emails after midnight during my worst semester, the neighbor who dropped off a casserole when I had the flu, my friend Sam who sat on the floor with me when everything felt impossible, and I added 2 more lines. One with the link to the live stream the school had just posted and another with a sentence that came to me whole, clean, and steady, a sentence I did not rehearse out loud because I wanted it to land the way truth lands when it is not inflated or wrapped in apologies. The next part felt almost too easy, which is how I knew I had finally stepped off their stage and onto mine. Because instead of begging for a ride or begging for their attention, I wrote one message to the extended family thread that usually only lights up for birthdays and football games. A friendly little note saying the ceremony would be streamed and that anyone who wanted to join could click the link at the scheduled time, and I sent the same message to my parents' church email contact who always forwarded community news without asking questions, and I told my aunt I would love it if she could watch even for a minute because she never misses Jenna's recitals, and it would mean a lot if she caught mine too. And then I put the phone down again and breathed through the urge to justify any of it, because I had not started a fight, I had simply opened the blinds. I went to the ceremony office the next day and asked where the camera would be and whether the live stream caught the podium head-on or at an angle, and when the student worker explained how the frame sits center and tight so remote viewers can see the speaker clearly, I felt that same quiet click because I understood I would not need volume or theatrics, I would only need eye contact, and the beauty of it, if you can call any of this beautiful, is that I was not planning to humiliate anyone or even say their names. I was planning to make a simple dedication that anyone could hear however they wanted, with the people who knew the context hearing it like a bell. Here is the part you might call petty, and I will not argue with you, but it felt right in my bones, and I am not sorry, because at the end of that day I pulled up Jenna's spa post one more time, clicked through the list of people who had reacted with confetti and hearts, and I sent the live stream link to each of them with a short, polite note that said I would be honored if they watched me walk, which was not a trap and not a rant and not even a complaint, but it was the first move in a game I had never been allowed to play, and as I hit send again and again I felt the anger drain out and something steadier settle in, because I knew that when I finally stepped up to that podium and looked straight down the lens, I would not be asking anyone to show up for me. I would be showing them what it looks like when I show up for myself. When people talk about favoritism in families, it is usually dressed up as something softer, like one child just happening to be more sensitive and needing extra support, or one child having more obvious talents that naturally draw attention. But what I lived through was not an accident of personality or circumstance. It was a steady drip of choices that always landed in my sister's lap like gifts while I was expected to applaud from the sidelines, and the worst part was how everyone acted like I was crazy for even noticing. From the time we were kids, Jenna was the one who got to quit piano lessons when she was bored because my parents said forcing creativity never works, while I was told to finish out the year of swim team even though I hated every minute of it because commitment builds character, and when she cried about a bad grade she was comforted and told that her teacher probably graded unfairly, while when I came home with the same problem I was lectured about study habits and told that life isn't fair so I better toughen up. Over time, the message became so routine that I could recite it. Jenna is delicate and must be cushioned. I am strong and can handle disappointment, and in practice what that meant was she got excuses while I got lectures. She got second chances while I got reminders to be grateful, and she got the spotlight while I was told the light would find me if I just waited quietly enough. By the time we were adults it was not even subtle anymore, because the small choices had turned into big ones. Like my parents taking out a loan so Jenna could have her dream wedding at a vineyard even though she and her fiancé could have settled for a courthouse and a nice dinner. While when I talked about applying for a graduate program they told me to be realistic and not saddle myself with debt because they could not possibly help, and I accepted it with that same bland smile they had trained into me, but I never forgot it. The day they skipped my graduation for her spa trip did not come out of nowhere. It was the natural continuation of years where her self-care was considered sacred and my accomplishments were optional, something to support only if it was convenient. And in the back of my head, I kept a running tally even if I pretended otherwise. The irony is that Jenna and I never had a direct blowout over it, because she liked being adored and I liked avoiding conflict, so she leaned into her role as the golden child and I leaned into mine as the one who kept quiet. And the system worked smoothly until that spa day cracked it open. When I saw her post, full of hashtags about treating yourself and family bonding, I realized I was not just excluded, I was erased, because in her story of the day there was no sibling with a graduation, no parents torn between events, just a perfect little family unit celebrating wellness, while I was the shadow left out of frame. It was not the absence that burned, it was the pretense, the way they could all play at being close while pretending my day did not exist, and when I thought about calling her to ask how she could do that I stopped myself, because I knew the answer would be some mix of, "Don't be so dramatic," and "It's not that serious," and I decided I would never again hand her that power to minimize me. What kept me steady in those days leading up to the ceremony was not anger, but something colder, a clarity that told me this was not the moment to confront them in private where they could spin the story or talk me into doubting myself again. This was the moment to let the truth show itself without me shouting or crying, and the graduation livestream was the perfect stage not because I wanted to embarrass them, but because I wanted to free myself from ever needing their version of support again. I knew that when I took that microphone, I would not name names or list grievances. I would deliver one line that sounded like a dedication, but carried the weight of every overlooked birthday, every ignored report card, every brushed-off milestone. And they could hear it however they wanted, but the people who had eyes would know. In those quiet hours when I replayed everything, I thought about how many times I had been told to understand Jenna's side, to be patient with her sensitivities, to accept that life wasn't equal. And I realized that in protecting her from discomfort, they had trained me to accept constant discomfort as my baseline, which meant she got to live unchallenged while I learned to walk with stones in my shoes. And once I saw it that clearly, I could not unsee it. I had spent years believing that if I just worked hard enough or smiled politely enough, they would eventually recognize me. But the spa day made me understand that recognition was never coming. And the only way I was ever going to feel seen was if I stopped waiting for their applause and claimed my own spotlight. That realization was not bitter, it was liberating, and it is what allowed me to sit through the hours before my graduation not with dread, but with anticipation, because I knew the script had finally flipped. So when people ask me why I did not call them out right away or why I did not blow up in the moment, I tell them it is because revenge does not land when you scream it into someone's face. It lands when you deliver it calmly in a way they cannot dodge. And as much as my parents thought they were skipping something small and unimportant, they had unknowingly set me up with the one opportunity one had been waiting for all along. And when that stage came into view, I was more ready than I had ever been in my life. Graduation morning did not arrive with the kind of excitement people describe in stories where their family is waiting at the door with cameras and flowers, but rather with a quiet that I had already anticipated. Because I knew there would be no parents rushing around to get ready, no reminders to bring my cap and gown, and certainly no last-minute hugs before we headed out, and though I told myself I was fine with that, there was still that flicker of ache that comes when reality matches. Exactly what you expected, but you wish you had been wrong. I dressed and prepared alone, letting the silence stretch without fighting it, and I checked my phone not because I thought I might see a change of heart, but because I wanted confirmation that they were exactly where I knew they would be, and of course they were. Right there in the comments of Jenna's spa post, with my mother writing about how proud she was of Jenna for prioritizing her wellness, and my father joking about how he could get used to this kind of self-care retreat, as if they had not just texted me days earlier about needing to rest and conserve their energy, and in that moment I felt something inside me sharpen rather than break. The drive to campus was strangely calm, with no distractions, no chatter, and no one asking about how I felt, which in a way made me even more focused, because the entire ride I thought about how many milestones I had let pass without protest, how many events I had let them miss without calling them out, and how every time I gave them a pass it only encouraged them to keep doing it, and I realized that today I had no intention of playing along in silence anymore. When I pulled into the crowded parking lot, I sat in my car for a few minutes longer than necessary, staring at the screen where the school had posted the live stream link again, and I imagined the viewers logging on from their homes, family members and friends watching their loved ones, and I thought about the people who would tune in just because I had sent them the link, people like my aunt and my advisor, and maybe even a few of my parents' church friends, who would now have a front row seat to whatever I chose to say. The ceremony itself was the kind of organized chaos you expect from a graduation, with students rushing around, faculty calling names, and volunteers trying to keep the line straight. And in the middle of all of it, I walked with a stillness that surprised even me, because I was not thinking about whether I would trip on stage or whether my hair looked fine under the cap. I was thinking about the exact moment when I would have the microphone and how I would not waste it. As the speakers went one after another, congratulating the graduates and sharing the usual inspirational advice, I kept my focus on the podium and the camera, reminding myself that this was not about theatrics or bitterness, but about reclaiming the respect I had been denied for years. And when I glanced up at the live stream camera, I knew it was already rolling, capturing every word for anyone watching at home, including the ones who had found better things to do. When my row finally stood, and we began the slow shuffle toward the stage, my hands did not shake and my stomach did not twist, because instead of nerves I felt that steady clarity again, the same one I felt when I first wrote down the line in my notes. And I knew I was exactly where I needed to be. As I waited, I thought about Jenna, probably scrolling through her comments, watching likes pile up on her photos, unaware of how quickly the tide could turn, and I thought about my parents, probably sipping drinks in their robes, telling themselves they had earned this break, never imagining that while they were indulging in their spa day, I was about to use the one spotlight they had denied me to finally tell the truth in a way they could not ignore. The closer I got to the podium, the more focused I became, until everything else blurred out, and I felt like the whole room was just a corridor leading to that microphone, to that camera, and to that one moment I had been waiting for. I cannot overstate how much discipline it took to hold my tongue until then, because every fiber of me wanted to release all the words I had bottled up over the years, every memory of being dismissed or overlooked, every insult wrapped in fake encouragement. But I knew if I did that it would only sound like bitterness, and what I wanted was something cleaner, sharper, and impossible to argue with, which is why I kept repeating to myself that all I needed was one line delivered with calm certainty. As the student before me finished and the announcer called my name, I walked forward with the weight of everything that had brought me there pressing down and lifting me up at the same time, and when I reached the podium and saw the light on the camera, I locked my eyes on it, steady and unflinching, because I wanted the people on the other side of the screen to feel that I was talking directly to them. The thing about revenge, if you want to call it that, is that it does not always need to be loud or messy. Sometimes it only needs to be true, and as I stood there about to deliver my truth, I understood that no amount of excuses or spin would erase the impact of what I was about to say. I gripped the podium, leaned slightly closer, and in my head I rehearsed the line one last time, not out loud, just to feel the rhythm of it, and I reminded myself that I was not angry anymore, I was simply ready. And with that readiness came a strange sense of peace, because for once in my life I knew I was not going to let them rewrite the story, and in a few seconds, when my voice went out through that live stream, I would finally step into the role I had been denied all along, the one who gets the last word. When my name was called and the applause rose in that polite, predictable way that ceremonies train into crowds, I walked to the podium with the kind of calm that does not come from confidence, but from finally deciding that there is nothing left to negotiate. Thanked the dean and the faculty in the same steady tone everyone uses because there is a script and I had no interest in letting them see me coming. Then I let my eyes land on the red light beside the lens and felt the room narrow into a straight line between me and the people watching from wherever they had chosen to be, which in my family's case was not a graduation hall, but a spa lounge with robes and lemon water, and a phone propped up to capture an angle they would regret. I spoke for a little while about the classmates who got each other through long nights and the staff who made sure the doors were open early and closed late, not because I needed filler, but because I wanted my voice relaxed and warm when I reached the part that mattered. And I thanked the people who pushed me when I wanted to quit without naming them, because some of them would recognize themselves and some of them would not. Then I paused just long enough to make the silence feel intentional, leaned a little closer so the camera would read my eyes, and delivered the line I had carried like a small, useful blade in my pocket for days, saying that to everyone who thought they had better things to do, this one is on me. And I let it sit there without decoration or explanation because the right people would hear the whole story inside those words while everyone else would just think I was being humble or dramatic depending on what made them comfortable. There was a beat where nothing happened and then the room did what rooms always do when a graduate dedicates a milestone to someone unseen. The crowd clapped and a few people whistled. The faculty nodded like they had heard a nice turn of phrase. And I kept my face neutral because the point was never to make a scene in the hall. The point was to send the message through the lens to the places where comfort had become a religion, and because I had shared the link with the exact people who loved to praise my sister's self-care days in public comments, I knew that line would not stay inside the hall. It would travel into living rooms and group chats and church circles where polite fiction usually goes unchallenged. I stepped away from the microphone and took my seat, feeling the buzz of my phone in my gown pocket as the live stream lag started to catch up with me, and I did not look down because I wanted to sit with the quiet for a minute. But I could guess what was happening without seeing it, since anyone who watches enough Family Dynamics can predict the order of operations, with my aunt reacting first, because she always does, then my advisor sending 5 exclamation marks, because that is how she cheers, without words, then a cousin asking in our family thread whether that line was about what he thought it was about, and after that the title push would reach the spa, where my sister's friends would realize what the sentence meant in a very specific context and would begin tagging each other under her check-in, as if the puzzle suddenly had an obvious piece. By the time the next speaker had reached the middle of their remarks, the phone was vibrating so often it might as well have been trying to jump free, and although I kept my eyes forward, I caught flashes on the lock screen when I shifted. A missed call from my father that came with a second missed call from my mother, a text from my aunt that said she was proud of me in a way that felt like more than academics, a notification that the school's live stream chat had picked up in volume, and a direct message from Jenna that started with my name in all caps followed by a question about what exactly I meant, which was funny because in all our years of being sisters, she has never once needed help interpreting praise when it belonged to her. When the ceremony director signaled the end of the speakers and the faculty lined up for the final procession, I finally allowed myself to glance down and scroll for a few seconds, and there it was, the cleanest kind of revenge I know how to deliver. Not a tantrum and not a list of accusations, just a timestamped truth that other people connected for me, with church ladies asking under Jenna's post whether she had tuned in because they just heard something powerful, with a neighbor replying that it must have been hard to miss such a big day, with an old family friend chiming in to say that priorities reveal themselves whether we plan it or not. And with every new comment, the distance between the story my family tells about itself and the facts people could now see got a little harder to bridge. I did not answer my parents' calls because I wanted the dust to move before I put words on it, and I did not reply to Jenna either because there was nothing to explain, and instead I did one simple additional thing that felt both kind and ruthless, which was to borrow the Livestream shareable clip feature and send the 2-minute segment with my dedication to the same extended family thread where I had posted the link, writing only that if anyone missed my remarks they could watch this, and as I hit send I felt that deep, quiet satisfaction you get when something finally lands exactly where it needed to, not because you shouted it into place, but because you set it down with care and let gravity do the rest. The recessional music started and the graduates began to move, and while everyone around me jostled and hugged and took photos for people who could not be there, I walked slowly and let the chorus of vibrations keep humming in my pocket. Because I wanted the message to keep traveling without me managing it, since the most effective part of this entire plan was that I never named a soul, never accused, never pleaded. I just looked into a camera and told the truth in one sentence, and the truth did what it always does when it finally gets air. It found its audience and started writing its own comments, while in the background the notifications from my sister stopped altogether. Her check-in froze at a certain point, and a new message from my mother appeared at the top of the screen with a line that said "We need to talk," which I let sit unopened as I stepped out into the hallway because the conversation, whether they liked it or not, had already started without me. After the recessional moved us toward the exit, and the hallway filled with the usual noise of people searching for each other and posing for photos, I stepped aside long enough to finally look at the screen that had been buzzing like a living thing against my ribs. And what I saw confirmed exactly what I expected, and also more than I had let myself hope for, because the family thread that usually sits quiet unless there is a holiday was suddenly a stream of surprised reactions and pointed questions, my aunt writing that she loved me and that the line hit like a confession everyone had been waiting to hear, 2 cousins asking whether my parents were watching and whether Jenna was still posting from her little wellness adventure, the church friends chiming in beneath the spa check-in with those layered comments that read like compliments until you sit with them for half a minute and feel the shame under the sugar, a few of my mother's closest friends asking in that careful tone whether she had really missed the ceremony because she was resting or whether it was something else, and all of it building into a tide that I did not need to steer because the work was steering itself. Jenna's first reaction landed like clockwork because she has always cared more about optics than substance, and within minutes of the clip reaching that circle, she switched her check-in to limited comments, replaced the caption with something bland about family time and mental health, and sent me a direct message that was half accusation and half plea where she claimed she had not known the date, said the spa day had been booked months ago, and asked me to clarify publicly before people misunderstood, which I ignored because there was nothing to clarify and because I had no interest in playing translator for choices that were not mine, while my father called twice and left a voicemail about a mix-up and my mother texted that she was proud of me. from afar in a way that tried to wear pride as cover for distance, and I let both messages sit untouched because I had learned the hard way that rushing to answer only gives people a head start on rewriting the story. I made a different choice instead, one that felt both steady and sharp, and I opened the school's shareable clip tool and posted that 2-minute segment with a simple caption that thanked the people who show up when it counts, tagging exactly the names that belonged there. My advisor and my neighbor and my friend Sam and 2 staff members who had quietly made my days doable, and I did not tag my parents or Jenna because they had excluded themselves, which is not cruelty, it is clarity, and I sent the same clip to the alumni office with a short note thanking the program for streaming the ceremony because it allowed far-flung supporters to be present, which they loved and reposted within an hour. And then I emailed the church office volunteer who always forwards community news to ask if she would include a line in the weekly email that said a recent grad wanted to thank the congregation for watching the live stream, which required no names and no drama and still put the truth exactly where it needed to live. For the celebration I wanted, I did something that might sound small but felt like a line in wet cement, and I booked a table at the little place that always saved a corner for me during midterms, sent a private invitation titled "For Everyone Who Showed Up," and included people who had actually stood next to me when it was not convenient, my advisor and her wife, my neighbor, Sam, and his parents who fed me when I could not afford takeout, 2 classmates who pulled me through our worst semester. And I did not invite my parents or my sister because this was not punishment, it was a boundary shaped like a dinner table. And I knew word would reach them anyway because the church email would go out and the alumni repost would circulate and the family thread would keep moving. Which is exactly what happened when my mother texted to ask whether I had meant to leave them off the guest list and whether she should bring a dessert, and I wrote back a single, calm message that said there was no oversight and that this dinner was for people who showed up, and that I hoped they would use the week to consider what showing up looks like, and that I would be ready to talk when they were ready to say out loud that they chose a spa day over my graduation without blaming calendars or headaches or anything else. Jenna tried one more time, sending a longer message that sounded like it had been edited by a friend, with phrases about different kinds of support, and not wanting to make things about her, and a request that I delete the clip because it was hurting the family brand, which would have made me laugh if I were in any mood to be generous, and I wrote back a short reply that said there was no brand here, only choices, and that the video was staying up because it was not an attack, it was a record of a sentence I said on my own stage, and then I went into my settings and changed my emergency contact to Sam, removed my parents from the default notifications for school updates, and felt that quiet shift you only feel when you stop arguing about recognition and start living like you deserve it. The fallout rolled through the week the way these things always do, with some relatives going quiet and others circling closer, with a message from the pastor that did not scold me but did talk about the difference between love in words and love in action. With my aunt calling to say she had saved the clip and planned to watch it again whenever she forgot that boundaries are not cruelty, and with my mother finally sending a text that did not spin or plead but simply said, "We made the wrong choice, we are embarrassed and sorry, and we want to make it right if you will let us," which did not erase anything but did mark the first honest sentence she had sent me in a long time. And I told her that the only way forward would be built on sentences like that one, spoken plainly and followed by proof, and that until then I would keep building a life with people who do not need a stage to understand what matters. I do not pretend that a single line in a live stream healed years of being set aside, and I do not pretend that I became a different person overnight, but I know that on that day I took back the story without screaming or begging. I drew a clear circle around the people who treat me like I matter, and I stepped into it without asking permission, and when I finally sat down at that dinner table and raised a glass to the ones who showed up, the satisfaction I felt was not spite disguised as victory. It was the grounded sense that I had finally taught them and myself what my standard is, and whether they ever meet it is their choice, while mine is already made.